Sam here from Sugar Spun Run, and today we are making my favorite homemade cinnamon rolls. All right, these are incredibly good homemade cinnamon rolls. We're going to be using instant yeast today. Everything comes together really quickly as far as cinnamon rolls go, so you can start these in the morning and have them with breakfast, start them early, have them ready for brunch. It's not a whole day project, which I love about them. Yet you're still going to get those nice, pillowy, flavorful cinnamon rolls that everyone loves. So we're going to be baking these in a pie plate. I have a 9.5-inch pie plate here. I'm just going to toss a tablespoon and a half of butter in this. So you could go ahead and melt this butter in the microwave because you want the butter to melt. We're also going to be preheating our oven to 200 degrees Fahrenheit at this point. Yes, you want that low temperature. It's going to help us get through this recipe quickly a little bit later on. But since we have that oven on a nice low temperature, I will usually just pop this in the oven for a couple of minutes while it's preheating, and then the butter melts, while I'm doing other things. Now I used unsalted butter today, but realistically for the butter for the pan, you could use salted or unsalted, whatever you have on hand. Now today's recipe can absolutely be made using a stand mixer, and I've written the recipe, so you have all of the instructions in the description on how to use a stand mixer. I'm sure you could figure it out, honestly. But because not everyone has one, I'm going to be making this by hand instead. So if you're making yours by hand, grab a large mixing bowl. And to this, we're going to start by adding 2 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, though you could absolutely substitute bread flour instead, same amount. That would be amazing. And we'll add 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, which adds a nice sweetness. This is a nice sweet dough. And then I kind of consider this to be like my secret ingredient for these cinnamon rolls. This is 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, which we're going to add. Now you can skip the cornstarch and replace it with all-purpose flour, like if you don't have it on hand. But I love using it because it makes the rolls a little extra fluffy, a little extra tender. It just really adds a nice little extra oomph to the recipe. So if you have cornstarch, add it. This recipe uses instant yeast, which helps us get it in the oven quickly. You're going to use 1 packet. I think these are, 1/4 ounce packets. Well, that's like 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. And since we're using instant yeast, you don't have to activate it first. But we're still going to be using warm liquid in a second. We'll get to that in a moment. We'll also add 1 1/4 teaspoons of table salt. It's fine being mixed in with the yeast. Some people get really worried about that. It's no problem. All right, let's go ahead and stir these ingredients together, get the yeast and all of the other ingredients nicely incorporated before we add our liquid. Okay, so for the liquid for this recipe, I use a blend of milk and water. I've got a 1/2 cup of whole milk and a 1/4 cup of water, regular water, and I'm just going to combine the two. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to heat these, and I want to warm the milk to a temperature of about 115 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't want to go high above that, or we could end up hurting our yeast if we did. So I'm going to aim for 115 degrees Fahrenheit. You can heat this on the stovetop if you want. You can heat it in the microwave. I'm opting for the microwave. Make sure you stir it before checking the temperature. I'm just going to use an instant read thermometer. And again, if you go too far, let it cool down a bit before you add it to your mixture. Okay, we are at 113, almost 114. That's fine. Get between 110 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit and you're good to go. So we're just going to stir this in to our flour mixture. I'm doing this kind of gradually, as much as I can. If you're using your stand mixer, you would still be using the paddle attachment at this point, stirring until it's combined. We're going to add our butter here too. So I have 4 tablespoons of butter sitting over here that I went ahead and melted. Just add the rest of that. Give this a brief stir. It's going to be too dry to mix all the way. And then I'll grab my 4 tablespoons of melted butter and I'll add this as well. Scrape my bowl because we do not waste butter around here. Sorry if I sound a little stuffy, I'm just getting over a cold. And we'll stir the liquid ingredients into our dry ingredients until we have a nice, it'll be a shaggy dough, but a combined dough. You want everything to be worked together. All right, once we are here and we have a shaggy dough, I'm just going to slide this out of the way for a second and crack our eggs. So you'll need 2 eggs for this recipe. You want them to be room temperature because they're going to incorporate into the dough a lot better if they are. We're going to be using 1 whole egg, and then from the second egg, we're just going to be using the yolk. So you can, toss the white, use it for something else. I like to save them, either make like macarons, or you can use a single egg yolk to make candied nuts, like candied walnuts or pecans. Lightly beat the egg first, which is really going to help it incorporate into the dough. Go ahead and add my first one. It'll look a little messy at first, don't worry. And then just to get that yolk, break the egg in half and then just pass that yolk back and forth. Oh, I broke it, but I didn't lose any, so we're good. And then it's already lightly beaten for me. All right, let's go ahead and mix those egg yolks into the dough. Again, this is a little easier if you have a stand mixer. It's a little messier without one, but you can certainly get it combined, as you'll see. And I do like to add the eggs last because the water, milk, and butter are a little bit warm and I don't want to accidentally cook the egg mixture. So I like to get the liquid ingredients like a little bit cool down by incorporating them into the dough, and then we add the eggs. And the reason we aren't using that second egg white is because I just wanted the extra yolk, which is going to make the cinnamon rolls like even more tender and even more, I think tender is just the main word I'm looking for here. They're really kind of like melt in your mouth. And while you can do this either with a stand mixer or by hand, I really don't recommend an electric mixer just because you really run the risk of burning out your motor that way. Okay, so once the egg is incorporated, we're going to start adding additional flour until we reach the proper texture and consistency, and I'll explain that in a second. Now, if you're using a stand mixer, swap out your paddle attachment for your dough hook attachment at this point. So I have some extra flour measured out. This is probably about a cup right here. I seriously doubt I will use all of it. Exactly how much you need is going to just depend on a lot of different factors, like the temperature of your ingredients, the temperature of your kitchen, so it's going to vary. So we're going to go by texture rather than by a specific amount. So this is nicely combined. I'm going to add a bit of flour and I'm going to stir it in until I get a dough that is clinging to itself and pulling away from the sides of the bowl. Right now it's still pretty messy. I want it clinging to itself. And once we start kneading it, we can always add more flour too. So if this is getting to the point where you know you need to add more flour, but it's just kind of too stiff to stir by hand, turn it out onto your counter, a lightly floured surface, and start kneading it, and you can add the flour that way. If we were using our stand mixer, our dough would be a bit more smooth, but since we're doing it by hand, the dough is a little bit more sticky and shaggy looking, but it is starting to cling to itself. So I'm going to add a little bit more flour here, and then we're going to turn it out onto our countertop. Okay, so you can see it's sticking to itself, it's clinging to itself, it's getting to be hard to mix with the wooden spoon. So you need a clean countertop. We're going to lightly flour it, and let's turn our dough out onto the countertop. Using the stand mixer, you'll be adding that flour in while you're kneading it with a dough hook attachment. Doing it by hand, you're mostly going to be adding your flour here. Well, not mostly, but you'll be adding some of your flour here. So whichever way you've opted for, we're going to knead the dough until it's smooth and elastic. So with the mixer, this is about 5 minutes on medium speed, medium-low speed, I should say. By hand, it can be a little bit longer, like 7 minutes, sometimes 10. Let's go ahead and knead this. And I was a little generous with the flour because I know I'm going to knead it as I knead it. And you don't want to add more flour than is necessary, but don't be afraid to add it. You need the dough to be workable and manageable. But I don't start to add more flour unless I notice it really sticking to my hands or really sticking to the countertop. And I would say at this point, I've probably added about a half cup more of flour, but that's going to vary. And to knead the dough, all you're doing is we're just keeping it moving. We're using our palms to push the dough away from ourselves, using our hands to pull it back towards ourselves, pushing it away again, and just pulling it back, pushing it, pulling it back. Just for anyone who's new to this. All right, I've been kneading for about 8 to 10 minutes at this point. The dough is smooth and elastic. It is still a little bit tacky to the touch. That's good. You don't want it to be super dry, but it's not sticking to the counter. It's not sticking to my hands. We're in good shape. So we're going to let this dough rest for a little bit. You want a new lightly oiled bowl. Add the dough to the bowl, and we're going to cover this with plastic wrap. We're going to let the dough rest for about 10, maybe 15 minutes. So it's not going to really double in size or anything like that like you would see with like a traditional active dry yeast recipe. So don't be looking for that. I do recommend putting it in a warm place though to let it rest. I'll usually put it on top of my oven because that gets warm, maybe the top of your refrigerator or any place in your kitchen that's a little bit warmer. Make sure it's draft free. So this is going to rest for like 10 minutes, and while it is doing so, let me clean this up and let's make our filling. Dough resting is a great opportunity to clean up the dishes you've generated so far and whip up this filling. This comes together really easily. You need a half cup of firmly packed light brown sugar. I like to use this instead of granulated sugar just because it gives you a nice richer flavor. We're also going to add a tablespoon of ground cinnamon, and I'm going to be using unsalted butter. This is 1/4 cup of softened unsalted butter. We don't need it yet, but we're going to use it for a cinnamon roll. Since I'm using unsalted butter, I'm going to add an 1/8 teaspoon of salt into this filling. If you're using salted butter, just skip the salt. Let's go ahead and whisk these ingredients together, break up any clumps in the brown sugar, and get everything nicely combined. Spoon might be a little bit better for this, actually. I love this filling. The brown sugar really makes such a difference. I mean, it's a subtle difference, but highly recommend. So let's grab our dough. This has been resting for a little over 10 minutes now. You can see not much has changed. That's fine. It needs some time to relax, but it's not going to look super different. I'm just going to lightly flour my surface. Don't want to go too crazy here, but I don't want the dough to stick. And we'll turn our dough out. I'll do a nice light dusting on top too, just to make it easy to roll out the dough, or you could dust your rolling pin, that would be fine too. So we're going to roll this out into a 15 by 9 inch rectangle. I'm really bad at rolling into nice uniform shapes, but I'm going to do my best here. Not my best rectangle, but I think we're going to make this work. All right, for the butter, we've got 4 tablespoons here. It should be really, really soft, like borderline melty. You can pop it in the microwave for a couple seconds because you want it to be really easy to spread. So I'm going to spread this evenly over most of the surface of this dough. So I'm going to leave like a 1/2 inch of the dough of a perimeter unbuttered. We want that butter evenly distributed. All right, let's take our cinnamon sugar mixture. Just gonna use my hands, not afraid of a little sugar, and scatter this evenly over the butter. Again, we're going to leave that perimeter around the edge. Sorry I'm so nasally, guys. I just can't really breathe through my nose right now. So just sort of poured it all on. Now I'm going to gently pat it into the butter. Nice even layer. Okay, we're going to roll this up and cut it, but we need a place to put it. So we need our pie plate with our melted butter. I forgot about mine at the beginning of this video, so it's still in the oven, which is really fine. And the pie plate will be a little bit warm too, which is good for the cinnamon rolls, if anything. So let me grab that. We have our pie plate here. So now we can roll this up and cut it into rolls. So you're going to start with your long end, and you want to roll it nice and tightly because you don't want the cinnamon rolls coming apart in the oven. So I just kind of use my fingers to just really tuck the roll over itself nice and tight, and then I just keep going back and forth. So we've rolled it into a nice log. And for the end here, we are going to just pinch this seam just to help keep it together. And usually when you roll it, it gets a little extra long, so I just kind of scoot it back to its regular size. And then I'll put that seam under. All right, let's cut our cinnamon rolls. Some people will trim the edges because they're not super pretty and they don't have a ton of filling in them. I don't do that. I don't want to waste any cinnamon roll dough, so I'm not going to do that. But I am going to cut these into about 1 3/4 inch sized slices. I'm using a serrated knife to cut these. Any sharp knife will work. I saw through them nice and gently. Some people like to take unflavored toothpaste and use that to sort of pinch the rolls. That's fine if you want to do that. I'm sorry, I said toothpaste, but I meant dental floss. Same genre, very different things. I can't actually usually find unflavored dental floss, so that's why I don't use that. Someone out there's looking for unflavored toothpaste to cut their cinnamon rolls. I'm so sorry. Let me spread that butter around a little bit. This pan is pretty warm still, and we'll arrange these in our pan. As I'm putting these in the pan, I'm just gently reshaping them. Sometimes they lose a little bit of their shape while you're cutting them, but you can see it's really not too bad. And these two are pretty small, so they're going to go in the center together. All right, once they're arranged, we're going to cover this pie plate with some foil, and we're going to transfer this into our 200-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven, and we're going to turn off the heat. All right, this warmth from this oven, it's warm, but it's not going to be too hot anymore because we've turned it off, is going to give these cinnamon rolls a nice boost. After 15 minutes, take it out of the oven, place it in another warm spot, like on top of the oven, and we're going to let it rest for 15 minutes. During this 15 minutes, you're going to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, now before these go in the oven, I wanted to share one optional ingredient / step that I sometimes, but not always do. So maybe you've seen this. This was like a trend on some social media platforms where people added a little bit of heavy cream to their cinnamon rolls, and it made them just extra kind of like gooey and soft. So if you would like, you can take 1/4 cup of heavy cream and drizzle it evenly over the cinnamon rolls. Again, the cream is optional, but I have shared this recipe previously without the cream. They're amazing without the cream, super tender, super soft, so flavorful. But because this has become kind of a popular thing, and I do sometimes do it, I just wanted to share this as an option. You're going to be happy with the results either way. Just a little bit messier, a little bit gooier this way, messier in a good way. The photos on my website are made without the cream added. All right, so your oven should be preheated. Your cinnamon rolls should be ready to go, slightly puffed. So transfer them to the center rack of your 350-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven without the foil. You should already have removed that. And they're going to bake for 20 to 25 minutes. You can also use an instant read thermometer to tell if they're done. Just test the thickest part of an outer cinnamon roll. It should be between 185 and 190 degrees Fahrenheit. They'll usually also turn a nice light golden brown on top. Now you'll be closer to the lower end of the bake time if you haven't added cream and closer to the higher end of the bake time, maybe even exceeding it if you did add the cream. So I like to prepare the frosting while the cinnamon rolls are baking because I like to add it on while they're still nice and warm, so I like to have it ready to go. We're just going to be making a cream cheese frosting because that's my favorite type, but I do have a basic cream cheese frosting, or I'm sorry, a basic cinnamon roll frosting if you're looking for that instead, one that doesn't use cream cheese. So let me know if you're looking for that. Okay, so super simple. You need 2 ounces of cream cheese. Now, I like this to be nice and soft, and this frosting is going to kind of be melty anyway, just because it's going on some warm cinnamon rolls. So in order to quickly soften the cream cheese, I pop it in the microwave for just a couple seconds. See how smooth that is now? Now I do the same thing with 2 tablespoons of butter. You can use salted or unsalted. Either one is fine. I am using unsalted because that's what I have in my fridge, and I will taste test it at the end. And if it needs a little salt, I'll add a pinch of salt. We'll also add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Let's add my homemade vanilla. I need to refill this. And first, I'll just kind of stir these things together. And if I've melted or softened the butter and cream cheese enough, I can do this by hand, but I have my electric mixer here, so I'm going to use that real quickly, just to make things nice and easy. Scraping everything off because I don't want to leave my butter or cream cheese behind. Hand mixer, just a real quick mix. And then I have a cup of powdered sugar. We'll stir this in. I'm just going to do like half at a time to try to avoid sending the sugar flying everywhere. And then this is optional, but a tablespoon of heavy cream is my preference, but milk would also work. It will make the frosting even more silky and will make it a little thinner, which I think works really well with the cinnamon roll because then it's kind of on that border between being a glaze and being a frosting. All right, let's take a look. Nice and silky smooth, give it a taste. You can add a pinch of salt if you need. It would be a really, really tiny bit. But nope, that's perfect. So as soon as our cinnamon rolls are ready, we'll let them cool down slightly, but our frosting is ready to go. All right, our cinnamon rolls are finished baking. We're going to let them cool for 10 minutes. So while they're still warm, again, it's been like 10 minutes now, we'll go ahead and add our frosting on top. I like a lot of this cream cheese frosting, which will probably surprise nobody, but you don't have to use all of it if you don't want to. I don't know why I would say such a thing. You should use all of it, it's amazing. Just dollop it. Oh, the pan is still a little warm. Dollop and swirl. You're going to get a little more gapping in your cinnamon roll if you use the heavy cream method than you will if you don't use the heavy cream. So since these are still super warm, they're gonna be really messy when I pull them out, but in real life, I wouldn't wait, so I don't know why I should wait on camera. Oh, they're so soft. I'm just trying to find where they divide. Oh yeah. Oops, we lost some. Like I'm not gonna go back for it. You belong to me. Come here. All right, that is how you make my favorite homemade cinnamon rolls. If you try this one, let me know what you think. I always do love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. All right, here we go. I'm using a fork so you can see how tender and soft these are. Again, cream or no cream, they're gonna be good. These are amazing. You've got to try them. Oh my gosh. Perfectly gooey.